Let's go ahead and pray.
Yes.
Let's pray, and then I'll give you some more things to complain about.
Because I can beat that dead horse all day.
We will work for nothing that need you.
Yeah, I think that's the one that they gave you to look at.
Lord God, forgive us for our sins and put us in proper fellowship with you.
Yes.
Thank you for all that you give us, for the 81,000 breaths a day, for all the gifts that you give us, including this great country. And we pray that you help us to keep it that way. Lord, we have some people in pain. You're giving me relief. I ask you to be with Cindy Williams and the other people we know that really need your help, your healing, your guidance, and support for their family members. Let the Spirit guide as we go through material tonight, and let the interpretations of what we hear be what you want. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Tonight we will be looking at the Genesis, the key to the reclaiming your culture. Ken Ham claims that this is his favorite talk on the subject of we need to have a biblical worldview. I got a ton of other stuff that we're going to go through. We do have copies, as usual, hard copies of the communique. Let me show you some of what's in there and some that's not in there. Next month, we will have Richard Stepanek from Alpha Omega Institute. I've only been trying to get Richard down here for 4 years.
Amen.
COVID got in the way. His wife's health got in the way. Fortunately, Mary is now good. But he's going to, I did a seminar with him, or a set of seminars with him in Colorado 6 years ago. And he did a piece on the waters in Genesis, which he is going to come to present to us next month on October 12th. And he's going to be a lot of other places. I've been working with him, and he's got Richard Docker and some other people in the area have been working to get him into Faith Baptist Church in Fredericksburg. He's going to talk on October 3rd at Cibolo Valley Baptist, which is my home church. Sunday, October 10th, he'll be at Leon Springs Baptist Church. I had emailed Michael Pinkston, but I never got a reply. At this point, I'm actually talking with Cornerstone about trying to get him in to present for them. But anyway, Richard will be here next month, and he's doing a range of presentations in a range of places. This is on our website. I just got it on today, and it's in the newsletter.
Amen.
Our upcoming schedule: Genesis, the key to reclaiming culture with Ken Ham. Next month, the waters in Genesis with Richard Stepanek. November, Biblical Authority versus Church Authority with Terry Reed. December, the transgender agenda, which is a hot topic.
And who
Should be
That is a video out of Answers in Genesis, I believe.
Genesis, and it's a set of positions from the UK and Scotland.
And so I was appalled that the AMA was considering removing gender from birth certificates. That was just, I was astounded that the AMA would be so stupid.
Because Joe Biden did an executive order on that.
Unfortunately, those kind of fights have been going on for some period of time. The American Academy of Pediatrics, for example, started decrying that deprogramming kids and people out of homosexuality was useless and did not work. And because of that stance, a large group of pediatricians and psychiatrists started their own pediatrics and psychiatry society. And simply abandoned it because of that politically correct stance.
Yes, indeed.
Something I would like you to think about for January. A possible meeting for January. Believe it or not, we got some guys who wrote books here. You wrote a book on what?
Fiction books. I haven't written any.
You did?
Yeah, I've written some fiction.
It was biblical fiction, was it not?
Well,
Kind of biblical history fiction.
One, yes.
And we might in January, because my book will come out by about December, we might have a report from him on his book, Terry Reed's book, and then mine.
Your book will be coming out in December?
It'll be out by December. I'm down to the final pass with the editors. Yes. My book, What If God Wrote the Bible? What If God Wrote the Bible?
Yes, that's a good.
My pastor used to hate that title. He would quickly say, yes, he did, because he couldn't handle the question. But that's a possible discussion, and we'll look at it. Other things coming up. Dr. Randy Galuzzo, who is the head of the Institute of Creation Research, will be at, thank you, Mary, at the Central Texas Creation Conference, October 16th, at Calvary Chapel, Austin, in Pflugerville, Texas. Incidentally, this is a paid conference. Tickets are $15. You can register online by going to centraltexascreation.com and get more information if that's what you want. And I just put that stuff on our website. That information is also available at that website and on the ICR website. But Randy will be in the area, who used to be a board member with us before he went on to bigger and better things. Prayer concerns. Thanks for the vaccine's arrival and relief from COVID. Show us how to respond to the new variants. Heal our nation from the civil unrest and violence in our cities. Pray that our nation heals and comes together. Pray for protection of the First Amendment, our institutions, and religious freedom. I'm really stunned by a nation in which in the last 2 years you could go buy a big screen TV and go to church. There's something wrong there, folks. There's something wrong there. One of the things we had on our last radio program was Carl Kirby. That was a repeat program, but he was talking about something that I just got a bulletin from the International Association for Creation that they're trying to push, and we are one representative of this. I actually have signed us up for this. That if people want to go through local museums, and we're talking secular museums, that we will provide dozens, that we will provide people to walk them through and give them a biblical worldview as they go through, as we did with the Whitty 7 years ago.
That was 7 years ago?
I'm serious.
Time flies whether you're enjoying it or not. Yeah. But you can, no matter what's on the placards, turn any museum into a creation museum. You just got to have the right biblical worldview.
Yeah, you gotta know your stuff.
You got to know your stuff. That is a true statement.
Just make it up.
Please no.
That's what they do.
That's what they do.
That's what they do.
Please no. Communicate. In our communicate this month, and again, hard copies are back there. You can also sign up on the sign-up sheet with your email to get an email to you each month. We have evidence for the dispersion to Australia and New Guinea from genetics. We have creation geology and online seminars available each month, the first Thursday of each month, from the Greater Houston Creation Association. Information about Dr. Robert Carter, Richard Stepanek, and those two people being in the area. I'm going to go over Carter in just a moment. And we have our Genesis commentary from Genesis 11 on the Tower of Babel. So that's all in this month's communique. We've got our weekly radio program. As I said, I just reviewed to you a little bit of what was with Carl Kirby from Reasons for Hope last week. Interesting topics coming up. Why would a good God allow death and suffering? A lot of people ask those questions. We've got a discussion on that. There are people out there who say Jesus never existed. He's like the Holocaust. He was a hoax. That's laughable, but we have a discussion. We have a discussion and data on that. There's a lot of good programs coming up, and there's a program schedule all the way to Christmas. This is on the website.
What is limited?
What's limited?
It's a little parody on the vehicles, a lot of times you can see a car that's called the Ford 500 or Ford LTD limited edition. So God is not limited. So what's that?
Is what?
God is not limited.
God is not
Not limited.
That's basically what that program is on. We deal with limits all the time. God is not limited.
Amen.
Dr. Robert Carter, biology professor with Creation Ministries International, will be at both the morning and evening services on Sunday, September 19 at Calvary Baptist Church in New Braunfels. Dr. Carter is one of the world's leading Christian researchers in the study of human genetics. When I have quoted to you in the past that we have some evidence that shows that mitochondrial DNA shows that we all came from one of the three wives of Noah's sons, that is data that was produced by Dr. Robert Carter. Again, he will be in the area at 9:30, 11, and 5 p.m. 9:19, when is that? That's this Sunday. That's this Sunday. And I think I finally ran out of stuff to tell you. We do have a host of people with Delusa and Stepanek and Robert Carter all being here in the area, and I've been chasing my tail trying to get stuff for Richard Stepanek for the last month, along with my book and along with basketball. I got to stop doing basketball soon. All right. Anything else that you want to talk about before we go to tonight's program?
So next month is speaking of repeat, what you did 20 years ago?
No. Okay. Who are we talking about next month?
So like, you did the thing about the waters.
No. No. What he will do, now again, this is all on the website, but let me give you specifically what Richard's going to do. Here, he's going to do the waters in Genesis. He's going to talk about that the Bible gives us indication that when God created all the matter in the universe, the first element created, everything was water. And he formed everything out of water.
Yeah, he did that.
Okay, well, not that I knew of here. Not here. I've been trying to get him here for 4 years. Not at this meeting. Now, he will also be talking on the origin of life and the glory of God at Cibolo Valley, as well as which God is the one true God. He's going to do multiple different presentations at all of these places. But that will have the waters in Genesis. Anything else you wanted to talk about before we go to tonight's program with Ken Ham? One thing I will tell you, this is a presentation tonight that Ken Ham is quite proud of. It's one he has deep belief in the fact that we have to have a biblical worldview to carry forward the Bible correctly, to read and interpret the Bible correctly. And when Ken gets excited about things, he starts having gusts of up to 132 words a minute. So listen up as he gets into it. He did that on my radio program when we interviewed him.
Well, it's good to see you all up and nice and bright and early, ready for a whole day of teaching. It's going to be great fun, isn't it? Well, we hope so, anyway. You know, it's interesting, as I travel around, I get introduced in all sorts of different ways. I was at a church not long ago, and the pastor introduced me as, well, our speaker today, he looks like Abraham Lincoln and sounds like Crocodile Dundee. So I get all sorts of interesting introductions here. The particular message that I want to give you this morning really is the heartbeat of the ministry of Answers in Genesis. And that's why I thought it'd be good to sort of start the day off today and the rest of the conference with this particular message, because it really does outline what Answers in Genesis is all about, the heartbeat of the creation ministry. You know, a lot of people, I think, have the wrong idea about creation ministry. They think it's creation versus evolution, or it's just an argument about the age of the earth or something like that. I want you to see this morning that what we're really on about as a ministry is upholding the authority of the Word of God and proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ and confronting the forces of secular humanism that are taking over the culture. That's really the ministry of Answers in Genesis. Now, as you think about that, I was just over in England not long ago, and I get to go to England a number of times over the past years. And I guess the first time I went to England, I was shocked. Because I was thinking of, the land of Whitfield, Wesley, and there are churches everywhere in England, turned into mosques and antique stores. But really there's only a remnant of Christianity left in England. In fact, England today, there's hardly any vestige of Christianity in public life at all. I mean, as a nation, from a Christian perspective, England is, you could say, it's almost gone. I came across some interesting articles recently about England. This one from an independent news source. Holy Week has begun with an expert prediction that the Christian church in this country will be dead and buried within 40 years. It will vanish from the mainstream of British life with only 0.5% of the population attending Sunday services of any denomination, according to the country's leading church analyst. That's a little frightening, isn't it? And then, in the same article, these findings come just 5 months after the publication of this latest English church attendance survey, independent study of all denominations. It showed that only 7.5% of the population went to church on Sundays. In the past 10 years, billed by the churches as a decade of evangelism, church attendance dropped by an alarming 22%. Before the last war, they say church attendance in England was probably around 40%, 50%. Now it's down to 7.5%. The prediction is 30 to 40 years it'll be down to 0.5%. It's pretty alarming, isn't it? What's happened to England? But I want you to look at America. America is the greatest Christian nation on earth. Do you realize here in America you have the largest number of churches, the largest number of Bible colleges, seminaries, Christian colleges, Christian bookstores, Christian resources, Christian radio, Christian TV in the entire world? But I want you to tell me, is America becoming more Christian or less Christian every day as you look at the big picture of this culture? What would you say? Less Christian. There's something dreadfully wrong with America. And I'd like to suggest to you that what's happening in America has already happened in England. And where England is today, America will be tomorrow for exactly the same reasons. And that's why Answers in Genesis and other creation ministries, I believe, have been raised up by the Lord in this period of history. Because in this era of history, there's a particular battle concerning the authority of the Word of God. Another alarming statistic is this. George Barna Research, I'm sure many of you have heard of that particular research organisation, found that when they asked students who come from church homes who go to public schools, and by the way, probably 85-90% of students from church homes still go to public schools in America, when they asked those students how many of them intended on continuing on in the church, the statistic indicated that 70% claimed they would walk away from the church once they left school. Pretty alarming statistic. I want to outline what I believe is happening to this culture with a verse of Scripture, John chapter 3 and verse 12. In the context of talking to Nicodemus about being born again, Jesus said this, if I tell you about earthly things and you don't believe them, well, how are you going to believe when I tell you about heavenly things? The Bible talks about spiritual things. It talks about moral things. It talks about heavenly things. But it also talks about earthly things. And actually the spiritual and moral things the Bible talks about are founded in those earthly things. If the earthly things are not true, if the history in the Bible is not true, then why should the spiritual and moral things be true? See, think about this. Does the Bible touch on geology, biology, anthropology, astronomy, physics, chemistry? A lot of people don't think about the Bible like this. One of the problems I believe we have in our culture today is that I find that most Christians look on the Bible, most people who go to church look on the Bible as a book of religion, a book of salvation, a book of morality, but the Bible is a book of history also. And by the way, if the history is not true, if the earthly things are not true, then how can the heavenly things, the spiritual things, and the moral things be true? See, the Bible does touch on geology, biology, astronomy, anthropology, physics, chemistry. It's all a part of that history. And if those things in the Bible are not true, if the science in the Bible is not true, that's a part of the history that leads to Jesus Christ, how can any of it be true? Geology. Does the Bible touch on geology? It sure does. It says there was a global flood. By the way, if there was a global flood, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. And you know what you find, don't you? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Because there's a lot of people today that say, but there's no evidence for a global flood. Where's the evidence for a global flood? I mean, all you find are billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. But, hey, you know, through the public education system, through the media, through the colleges, universities, museums, what are generations of students being told around the world? What are people in general being told? There never was a global flood. And by the way, if what the world says concerning that matter, that there never was a global flood on Earth, if what the world says is correct, then what the Bible says about geology is wrong. Because it says there was a global flood. You know, when I was over in England, I walked into this particular church here. It's called the Natural History Museum in London. And it really is a church. It's a church of atheism, actually. And it was so sad to watch all those thousands of students, as they do elsewhere in the world as well, walking into these museums, and then they come across a sign like this. Well, the myth of a global flood. You see, the world teaches there never was a global flood. If what the world teaches is correct, if what the museums of the world and the public schools teach is correct, then the Bible's geology is wrong. What about the Bible's biology? Well, the Bible says God made distinct kinds of animals and plants, each to reproduce after their own kind. That's biology. But you know what the world teaches? As a result of the influence of Darwinian evolution, that one kind of animal changed into another over millions of years. So if what the world teaches is correct, the Bible's biology is wrong. What about the Bible's anthropology? Well, the Bible teaches we're all descendants of one man and one woman. That man was made from dust, a woman from his side. The man didn't come from an ape man, the woman didn't come from an ape woman. If the Bible's correct biologically, then there's only one race of people. But you see, the world is taught that there are different races of people that evolved at different levels. And the man didn't come from dust, and the woman certainly didn't come from his side. So if what the world teaches, the public education, the media, if what they teach is correct, then the Bible's anthropology is wrong. What about the Bible's astronomy? Well, the Bible teaches that God made the sun, moon, and stars on day 4. It teaches God made the earth on day 1. And the earth was covered with water. That's astronomy. You know what the world teaches? The Big Bang. In fact, you know, many Christian leaders, in fact, I find most Christian leaders in America, Australia, England, around the world, believe in the Big Bang. And they say, we can believe the Big Bang. You can believe that. You can believe that God used the Big Bang. By the way, the Big Bang teaches that the sun came before the earth. The Bible teaches that the earth came before the sun. So if the Big Bang is correct and Christian leaders are telling people we can believe in the Big Bang, what they've effectively said is, well, the Bible's astronomy is wrong. And here's the point that I want to make to us. If the Bible's earthly things, if that history concerning geology, biology, anthropology, astronomy, if that history that leads up to the message of Jesus Christ concerning all those particular things in the Bible is not true, if the earthly things are not true, then ultimately the spiritual and moral things are not true either. You see, Christianity is not just based in interesting stories. Christianity is based in real history, is it not? If the events of Jesus Christ's birth, death, resurrection didn't happen in history, how can we be saved? If we don't all go back to one man in history. You know those genealogies, those passages you like to read before you go to sleep in the Bible. You know, so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so. Really great bedtime reading, aren't they? But they're there for important reasons, to show that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, stepped into history to be a descendant of the first Adam, called the last Adam, to die for the descendants of Adam. And that history goes all the way through those begats, all the way back to the first man, Adam. But that same history encompasses geology, biology, astronomy, anthropology, physics, chemistry, that the world says is not correct, and much of the church says we can believe what the world is saying, which means effectively the church has said the history in the Bible is not true. Ultimately then, why will generations believe the spiritual and moral things that are based in the history? It's one of the reasons why when I'm teaching children, I like to emphasize to them, the Bible is not just a book of religion. It's not just a book of salvation or a book of morality. The Bible is a book of history. It's the history book of the universe. And as such, by the way, if we really understand the Bible, do you realize that it should be foundational to all of our thinking in every area? You know what I mean by that? You see, I have to put on glasses sometimes to be able to read, because once you get over 40, you know what happens. It's sort of downhill. Once you get over 50, you're sliding pretty fast. I found somebody said to me, once you get over 40, you know you're living. You don't. You know you're dying. That's what I found out. But anyway, so I put on these glasses, okay. Oh, now I can see my computer. This is great. Now I can see what I'm doing here. But, you know, when I put on my glasses, I can actually understand what is here. I can see it. Do you realize the Bible to every Christian should be a set of glasses? It's not that we take the world's ideas and try to fit them into the Bible. If the Bible is a revelation from God concerning the history of the universe, to give us the big picture of history in every aspect of reality, then the Bible should be a pair of glasses where we have that history concerning the past. See, we all live in the present. Or most of us live in the present. You all exist in the present, right? And look around the world. We see animals, we see plants, we see the Grand Canyon, we see fossils, we see dinosaurs, and we really say, well, what happened in the past to cause all these things to be here? Well, if you weren't there, you don't know. But we have a revelation from one who says, I've always been there, and I had written down for you what happened. Here's the big picture of history in geology, biology, astronomy, anthropology, so you can understand the world, so you can know who you are. You see, we shouldn't be looking at the world first and then trying to say, now how do we fit this all into the Bible? We should be saying, we have a revelation of history to give us the big picture of understanding of every aspect of reality. So now, living in this present world, we can look out there and we shall be able to explain why there's death and suffering, and why there's beauty, and why there's ugliness, and why plants are here, and why there are fossils, and why there are layers of rock, as you see at the Grand Canyon, why these things exist. Actually, when you go through the Bible's history, we call it the 7 C's of history, which is going to be the basis of our whole thrust through the Creation Museum. 7 is God's perfect number, and there were 7 days in the first creation week, and so we just like that concept of the 7 C's of history. God created, He created in 6 days. We'll talk about that in another session, about the days of creation, the fact that the Hebrew word yom, when used with evening, morning, number, night in Genesis 1, always means an ordinary day. We'll do that in another session. God created in 6 days. By the way, during those 6 days, there are events of geology, biology, astronomy, anthropology, physics, chemistry. Everything was very good. There wasn't any death or disease or suffering in the world. There were no hot dogs or anything like that, because hot dogs are dead everything. And then, I know, I worked in a hot dog factory once when I was a student, paying your way through college, and do you know what goes into a hot dog? There is nothing that doesn't. That's what I found out. But anyway, everything is very good. And then corruption entered, sin and death entered the world as a result of Adam's rebellion. By the way, death relates to geology. You know why? There are dead things in geology. In fact, there are billions of dead things in geology. And so you see, if death came after sin, then when you're explaining fossils, you have to take that into account. And if fossils are dead things, which they are, then you can't have dead things before Adam sinned. Then there was the event of Noah's flood. By the way, we've already talked about geology, biology, astronomy, anthropology in that part of history anyway. And on Noah's Ark, there were 8 people, land animals saved on board the boat. What happened outside the boat? All sorts of geological events with those biological events and anthropological events on board the Ark. If it's really true, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. And then the confusion of the Tower of Babel. God gives different languages that would split up the gene pool, forming different people groups all over the world, which is why we have the American Indians, Fijians, Eskimos, Hawaiians, and so on. Jesus Christ stepped into that history. He died on a cross, was raised from the dead. And one day there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth to come. And friends, there is a summary of the history according to the Bible. These are the events of the past to give us the big picture of history, and certain events concerning the future as well, to enable us to put on those glasses so we can look out at the world, and as we look out at the world, we can say, I have a revelation from one who's given me the big picture of history, so I can go out there and say, fossils, yeah, dead things, yeah, couldn't have been formed before Adam sinned. The flood of Noah's day, that would have affected the geology over the planet. Yeah, all people must be descendants of one man and one woman. The Tower of Babel, that's where different languages came from. See, we have the big picture of history to explain the world. Isn't it exciting being a Christian? Yeah. We know someone who was there. The evolutionist don't. Now, one of the most asked questions I get asked as I travel around is this one. Well, how do you fit dinosaurs into the Bible? It's interesting. I can be in a church situation and I say to people, how many of you would like to know how you fit dinosaurs into the Bible? Hands go up all over the room. And then I say, well, here's the simple answer. The simple answer is you actually don't. And they look at me and say, huh? I had someone say to me, don't you believe in dinosaurs? Of course I believe in dinosaurs. I met a lady who was a wife of a pastor in Ohio, actually, about 2 years ago. And by the way, there are more people like this out there. It sort of worry me. They'd probably have driver's licenses too. But this particular person said, she got real upset with me. And she came up and said to me, you shouldn't talk on dinosaurs and so on because they're just a fraud and they never existed. And I said, whoa, what's the matter here? Found out that because she saw that dinosaurs are so equated with evolution of millions of years, she didn't know what to do with them, so she taught her children they didn't exist, they were just a fraud. I said, what do you do when you walk into a museum and your kids say, Mum, what about all those bones? What bones? I don't see any bones. What are you talking about? Of course dinosaurs existed. But my point is, you don't fit them into the Bible. Do you know what we tend to do in this world? Do you know what most people in the church tend to do? We listen to what the world says, their interpretation, their belief about the past that they apply to the evidence of the present. And we take that interpretation and say, what do we do with this? How do we fit in the Bible? Say, no. If you understand the Bible, you use the Bible to explain dinosaurs. See, first of all, let's just run through the big picture, okay? And what I want to say to you is this. The Bible will give us the big picture of history to understand dinosaurs. Then, if the Bible's history is correct, real science, operational science, the real science of biology, geology, using your five senses in the present, which creationists, of course, believe in, should confirm the Bible's history. Now, we can't scientifically prove it, and we're not here to do that. But it should confirm it, because if the Bible's true, it should be logical, it should be defensible, it should make sense of what the world is all about. And it does. It's exciting being a Christian. In fact, that's what this whole conference is about, really. You're going to hear all sorts of information you already did last night from real science that confirms the Bible's history. Isn't it exciting being a Christian? Really? The Bible's true. Now, see, think about it. The Bible doesn't tell us when God made T-Rex, right? Actually, it does. It doesn't use the word T-Rex. See, because there's a big picture of history. He made the land animals on day 6. T-Rex was a land animal. The Bible tells us when God made T-Rex. He made T-Rex on day 6. Alongside of Adam and Eve. Whoa, dinosaurs live with people. Absolutely. How do you know that? Well, God was there, I wasn't. He said he made land animals and people on the same day. What did they eat? Well, the Bible says they ate plants. Really? Yeah, it says all animals ate plants. Genesis chapter 1, verse 30. Adam and Eve ate fruits and plants. And then sin and death entered the world. So you couldn't have had any dead dinosaurs before Adam sinned. Well, how do you find fossils of dinosaurs? Well, how do you make a fossil anyway? You've got to cover something quickly, and you've got lots of fossils all over the earth, billions of dead things, in fact, buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. Hey, there was a global flood. If there's a global flood, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. How you do? Isn't that interesting? Well, dinosaurs didn't go on the ark, though. How do you know that? It says that in Genesis 6. It says all the land animals except dinosaurs went on the ark. Well, it doesn't. It says every kind of land animal, the same as created in the first chapter of Genesis there, on the 6th day of creation, went on Noah's ark. Well, representative kinds. Dinosaurs must have been included. By the way, the average size of a dinosaur is only the size of a sheep anyway. Not all were large. And even the large ones were once small. But there was plenty of room on the ark. Then what happened? Those who didn't go on the ark drowned. You find dead ones over the earth. Then they came off the ark after the flood. And like lots of other animals, started to increase in number and migrate around the earth. But then due to the effects of sin and the curse, and due to the effects of the flood, and now all the problems we have on this earth, lots of animals have become extinct, and the dinosaurs became extinct, and we didn't see one on the way to the conference. What's the mystery? Hey, see, the Bible gives us the big picture of history. Now, do you know what we do? And we'll be doing this at this conference, and we do it in our other programs, videos, books, and so on. I'll just give you a couple of little examples. Then we say, now let's look at the present and see if real science in the present has anything that could confirm this history. And there are lots of things, but here's just a couple. For instance, in Montana, secular scientists were shocked when they found red blood cells in a T-Rex bone, supposedly 65 million years old. That doesn't make sense. But it sure seems to fit with a young age for things. And then, all over the world, you actually find pictures, pictographs, carvings, like this one here from Utah. If you take a close-up look at it, it looks like a dinosaur was drawn by Indians. And even the evolutionists, in a quote, said, well, there's a petroglyph in National Bridge's National Monument that bears striking resemblance to a dinosaur. Why couldn't it be a dinosaur? Well, when you ask the evolutionists, they say because Indians didn't live with dinosaurs. But they weren't there. The Indians were. That's the difference. Now, this doesn't prove that they were dinosaurs, but look, there's lots of evidence like that that confirms the Bible's history. Isn't it exciting being a Christian? Yeah. But you see, that's how we should be operating. But the sad thing is, you know what you find? Most Christians, most of the church, doesn't seem to have any answers in regard to these things. What do you do with dinosaurs? Well, we don't know what to do with dinosaurs. In fact, you know what's interesting is I travel around, I've traveled around this ministry now for something like 30 years. I find people ask the same basic questions over and over and over again. You know what they are? It doesn't matter whether I'm in Christian college, secular college, doesn't matter whether I'm on Christian radio, secular radio, I get the same questions over and over again. And they sort of go like this. So what do you do with dinosaurs? And where did Cain get his wife? And who wrote the Bible anyway? And who was Cain's wife? And what about all the ape men? And who did Cain marry anyway? And how did Noah get all the animals on the ark? And I want to know who Cain's wife was. And well, what about Lucy? And who was Cain's wife? But there's not enough water to cover the earth. And I want to know where Cain got his wife. And what about the millions of years? And who on earth did Cain marry? And by the way, you know one of the most asked questions I've ever been asked? Oh, Cain's wife. It's embarrassing. I talk more about somebody else's wife than my own. And incidentally, we do have answers to that. But do you know why people are asking those questions? What about carbon dating? What about the radiometric dating methods like uranium, lead, potassium, argon? How did Noah fit all the animals on the ark? Where did Cain get his wife? What about all these ape men? What about Lucy? What about Neanderthal man? Well, wait a minute. There's not enough room on Noah's ark. Do you know why they ask those questions? Doesn't matter wherever you go, they ask those questions. You know why? Because the world has taught a history that contradicts the Bible's history. And what they're really saying, if you're saying the Bible's true, and you're saying we've got to believe that stuff about Jesus and morality from the Bible, well, wait a minute, where did Cain get his wife? What about all the ape men? In other words, but the Bible's history is wrong. Because through the education system and the media, they've been educated that you can't trust the Bible's earthly things. You know what much of the church does when they're asked those questions? Oh, well, don't worry about that. Just trust in Jesus anyway. You know, it's interesting. I was just at a Bible college with a few hundred students, and I do this in auditoriums all across America. I get the same response every time. And I said to them, put your hands up. In fact, we should try that here. Let's see what happens here. Okay, I go out on a limb doing this. Put your hands up, not yet. Put your hands up. If when you've tried to witness to somebody in today's world, they bring up evolution or millions of years or science or some of those questions that I just asked as a sort of reason why, you know, you can't really believe what you're saying or that Christianity can't be true, or put your hand up if you found that. I mean, most of you put your hands up. And yet if you go to the average church and ask, what are the answers to those questions? They say, well, we don't know, but trust in Jesus anyway. In fact, a lot of them say, oh, they're just red herrings, those questions. You've got to tell people about Jesus. And I'm saying, wait a minute, do you know why they're asking those questions? They don't believe the Bible can be trusted. You want to tell them trust in Jesus, that comes from that book. They're asking questions to you to defend the history, and you're saying, well, don't worry about that, just believe this stuff anyway. No wonder the world doesn't listen like it used to. You know why I believe we have a major problem? You see, friends, if I can say this, I believe right there in our own homes and churches, we don't teach our children correctly. See, we teach Bible stories. You say, what do you mean? Well, you know, Jonah the great fish, the feeding of the 5,000, Paul's missionary journey, Jesus on the cross, Noah in the ark. But don't you believe those? Yes. But what's wrong with that? It's the way we teach them in today's era of history. See, let me explain to you what I'm saying. I want you to tell me the answers here. Let's take Sunday school material. If I talk to the average Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Brown, you know, I've been teaching Sunday school for 140 years. I said that in Jamaica at a church once, and they said, there is a Mrs. Brown here, she's about that old, and she teaches Sunday school. So I had to change to Mrs. Smith, you know, to be tactful. I'm not having a go at the Mrs. Browns or whatever. I praise the Lord for people who dedicate themselves to teach children. I understand that. But I want you to realize a problem here. If I say to the average Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Brown, in Sunday school, do you teach geology, biology, astronomy, anthropology, physics, chemistry? What's Mrs. Brown going to say? No. Oh. Well, what do you teach in Sunday school? Oh, we teach about Jesus, we teach the Bible. Oh, I see. Well, tell me, Mrs. Brown, I want you to tell me in a loud voice the answer to this question. Tell me, Mrs. Brown, where do kids go to learn about geology, biology, astronomy, anthropology, physics, chemistry? School. Oh, school. Oh, I get it, Mrs. Brown. Oh, I understand. We teach Bible stories at church, and we send kids to school. The majority of kids from church homes still go to public schools in America, and that's true around the world, in the state education system. And what they're being told every day is the Bible's not true, the Bible's not true, the Bible's geology's not true, its biology's not true, its anthropology's not true, its astronomy's not true. See, you think about America. In America today, by and large, Christianity's been thrown out of the public education system. The Bible's gone, creation gone, prayer gone, 10 Commandments is gone. You know, it's like I was interviewed on Fox News once, and the guy said to me, but if you get creation back in schools, that's bringing religion back into schools. I said, it's about time the American public woke up to the fact that when they threw creation out, and they threw prayer and the Bible out, they didn't throw religion out, they threw Christianity out. Now they're teaching generations of kids that you can explain everything without God. That's the religion of naturalism, the religion of atheism. You didn't throw religion out, you replaced Christianity with a different religion. And we need to wake up to what's happening here. Now, what I want you to understand here is this. We're sending, by and large, the majority of kids from church homes to a system that teaches them that you can explain everything without God, and what they're taught in geology, biology, astronomy, anthropology directly contradicts the Bible, and what they're really hearing, and it mightn't be necessarily said this way, sometimes it is, by the way, but what they're really hearing is the Bible's biology is not true, its geology is not true, the Bible's earthly things are not true, the Bible's history is not true, the Bible is not true. They go to church and we tell them all these wonderful stories. Wonderful stories. But they're being taught a history that they think is the real history. Do you know where I believe this started? We'll talk more about this in one of the other sessions, and particularly Dr. Terry Mortensen will too. Back in the 1700s, early 1800s, is where I believe a battle occurred in this era of history. See, 2 Corinthians 11:3, you know what Paul says? Beware lest by any means as a serpent beguiled Eve through his subtleties to your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity which is in Christ. You know what Paul is saying? He's saying this: Satan is going to use the same method on you as he did on Eve to get you to a position of not believing the Word of God. And you go back to Genesis 3 and what do you find? Did God really say this? What was Satan doing? He was getting Adam and Eve to doubt the authority of the Word of God. And you know what Paul's warning us? Satan is going to do the same thing with us. And right down through history, there's been battle after battle after battle. There was a battle in Luther's day, for instance. It manifests itself in different ways in different periods of history. But the battle is the same, getting people to doubt the authority of the Word of God, and thus not to believe the Word of God. And what we have to come to grips with as a church is that in this era of history, there are lots of things that came together all at the same time, whether it's higher criticism or whatever. But in this era of history, a key to understanding what happened was back in the 1700s, 1800s, the idea of millions of years started to be popularized. Many of the theologians in England, for instance, said, well, we can take the millions of years, we can add it to the Bible and reinterpret the days. We can reinterpret the Bible's geology. And along comes Darwin, we reinterpret the Bible's biology. And in many people's eyes, this was the so-called scientific justification now for not believing the Word of God. Now we've got real science that says the Bible's not true. And it came together with lots of other things. And so then comes along the Big Bang and we reinterpret the Bible's astronomy. And you know, by and large, what happened? By and large, the church basically did this. They said, well, we can give the earthly things to the world. We can let the world teach the history of the universe as long as we keep the spiritual and moral things. That's what's most important. The message of the gospel, the Christian morality. And so we've had generation after generation after generation now that are being taught the world's earthly things. That's the real history. So we teach the spiritual and moral things and teach wonderful little Bible stories. And as time has gone on, generation after generation, what happens? Generations become more consistent. It's not something that happens overnight. It's something that's progressive. It's a whole philosophical change and an attitudinal change into an understanding of the Word of God. And so as you see what's happened in America, and as creation gets thrown out, prayer thrown out, 10 Commandments thrown out, the Bible gets thrown out of schools, and they're taught this real history, generations are starting to have this philosophical a change of understanding in regard to Scripture that really the Bible's not true. Really the Bible's not true. And now, if you look around and you go around to most churches and you turn on Christian radio and you turn on Christian television and you go to most churches, most of the preaching is spiritual, moral things, relationships, but it's not dealing with the earthly things because we gave them to the world. And yet we stand back and look at the big picture, and the big picture is we're losing the culture. England has basically lost the culture. And for all the mega churches, and for all the worship, and all the praise songs, and all the things that the church does, you stand back and look at the big picture. We're losing the culture, so there's something fundamentally wrong. What happened to England is happening to America. What you see in England is the result of that compromise, of that disconnect. And that's what happened. The church disconnected the Christian message from the earthly things. It disconnected the spiritual things from the earthly things. It disconnected the message of Jesus Christ, the message of the gospel, and the Christian morality from the history. We gave the history to the world, and now generations have been indoctrinated in that and starting to become consistent and realizing, wait a minute, if the earthly things are not true, neither should the rest be true. You know, I had a lady come to me and she said, well, our Sunday school literature is creationist. Look at it. And see, here's a major problem again. Even conservative churches don't understand this, I find. Because this lady's from a conservative church and she said, look, we teach kids Genesis. Look at the story on the flood. Look at this. Noah's Ark was a real boat. The animals got on board. And there was a global flood. We even teach a global flood. And the wicked people drowned. See, we tell kids it's true. I said, ma'am, you're missing the point. I said, what? I said, don't you understand? You know what those kids are being taught today? Noah couldn't fit all the animals on the ark. The fossils are millions of years old. There's not enough water to cover the earth. Did you connect that history in the Bible to biology, to geology? Did you equip them, like 1 Peter 3:15 says, to be ready to give an answer to defend your faith? Did you give them answers to what the world is saying now to undermine that history? You just taught it as a story. Even though you taught it was true, you still taught it as a story. Can you imagine if we had whole generations of kids coming from our Christian homes and churches? And when somebody says, well, how did Noah get all those animals on the ark? Oh, I got an answer. I was taught that by my parents, my Sunday school teachers, my church. I've got an answer. He didn't need all those varieties of dogs. You see, all dogs are related anyway. He only needed 2 dogs. He didn't need all those varieties of elephants. He only needed 2 elephants. Oh, natural selection? That's not evolution. That's just variation within a kind. Oh, you know, Noah only needed 16,000 individual animals on Noah's ark. Oh, there's plenty of room on the ark. But there's not enough water to cover the earth. Oh, I'm glad you asked the question. I've got an answer for you. Do you realize if you level out all the mountains and the ocean basins, there's enough water to cover to a depth of 2 miles? Oh, there's plenty of water. See, there are fossils on the top of Mount Everest, marine fossils, almost on the top. Does that mean Mount Everest was covered by the waters of the flood? Oh, no. You know what you see all over the earth? Evidence that mountains were raised up. Evidence of mountain building. And, well, you know, Psalm 104 even indicates how God ended the flood. The mountains raise up. And the oceans sink down, the ocean basins sink down, the water pours off the earth. And, oh, there's evidence consistent with that all over the earth. Oh, there's plenty of water. There's enough to cover the earth anyway. But even so, there's more water in the mantle than there is on the surface of the earth. But there's plenty of water. Well, where did Cain get his wife? Oh, I've got an answer for you. Here's the answer. What about the ape men? What about Lucy? Well, you know, I saw this program by Dr. Manton, and let me tell you about Lucy. Well, what about uranium-lead dating? Oh, I've got an answer for you. What about the Grand Canyon? I've got an answer for you. You know what we're doing? Hey, I'm answering the questions of the world. I'm telling you the Bible's history is true. I can defend my faith. I can give answers for what I believe. The Bible's history is true. Its earthly things are true. Now let me tell you about Jesus, because just as the earthly things are true, so are the spiritual things that are based in this book that's true. Can you imagine what would happen if we raised up whole generations of kids that were thinking like that? See, we're missing the boat. You don't see geology, biology, astronomy being taught in churches. See, I've had people say to me, are you advocating that we should teach geology, biology, astronomy, physics, chemistry in our Sunday schools? Absolutely. Because the Bible does. But you see, don't get the wrong idea. The Bible's not a science textbook. A university student once jumped up and said, but the Bible's not a science textbook. I said, you're right, and I'm glad about that, because science textbooks change every year. If the Bible was a science textbook, we'd really be in trouble. But where the Bible touches on science, can we trust it? Absolutely, because if you can't, how can you trust the rest? And you see, that's the point. Do you realize pastors, evangelists, we should be teaching physics, chemistry, biology, geology, astronomy. No, not all the details, but the big picture of history that the Bible gives us, and we should be teaching it in a way that reaches today's culture. You know what I'm finding? I see the pattern as I travel across America and even England, other parts of the world. Because the church realizes there's something wrong, we try to appeal to people's emotions, and so there's an emphasis on worship. Don't get me wrong, we need worship. I'm not saying we don't, but it seems to me, you know, worship, singing, the things that appeal to the emotions, well, they're the more important. And we try to do all this, but you stand back and look at the big picture. We're losing the culture because we're not dealing with the real battle where it's at. What a difference if we came into a church and said, friends, we're going to teach you what's wrong with the culture. We're going to tell you what's happening out there. We're going to teach you how to defend your faith in today's world. We're going to identify the real problem as to why this culture is degenerating the way it is, so that you can go out there and start proclaiming the gospel in a way that'll make sense to people. What a difference if we started doing that. Then we might have a lot of people wanting to worship the Lord. Now, let me picture it for you this way. We have generations today looking at the Bible and saying, can the Bible really be trusted in a scientific age? Because for many today, the world has bombed out the Bible, evolution, 8 million years, and so on. And they're looking there and saying, well, what's the church going to do about this? Well, much of the church is saying, well, don't worry about all that anyway. Just trust in Jesus. Now, don't get me wrong, I want people to trust in Jesus. But as I see it, The world is like a Concorde jet. Although the Concorde jet's become extinct, I've got to get a different jet now. But the world is like a Concorde jet, and it's out there flying ahead. We got all the evidence the Bible's not true. Evolution, millions of years. This is what we know today. The Bible's not true. This is a real attack that tells you the Bible's not true. And much of the church is in a little single-engine plane way behind saying, well, trust in Jesus anyway. And we wonder why we've got a problem. See, what I'm trying to tell us is this. The Bible is not just a book of religion, a book of spiritual things, moral things. It's a book of history. And that history encompasses anthropology, geology, biology, astronomy. And really, what the Bible teaches is held together by that history. And all those so-called Bible stories are a part of that history. They connect to anthropology, geology, biology, astronomy. Holds it all together. Here's the first problem. The first problem is, by and large, the church teaches those Bible stories disconnected from history. It's disconnected from biology, geology, just like the Noah's flood Sunday school lesson I told you about. And the second problem is this. Back in the 1700s, 1800s, this is where the attack in this era of history began, in a big way. You see, the church said, well, we can adopt the world's geology, that's okay. And we can adopt the world's biology, and we can adopt the world's anthropology, and we can adopt the world's astronomy. By the way, when the church did that, you'll notice on my picture there that a bubble formed around the church. You know why? Because in reality, what the church stands for, the whole Christian worldview, can't exist within that secular framework of history. So now we've sort of disconnected the Christian worldview from its foundation in history. And now, what the church teaches is sort of outside of that history, and they're looking at the world, and this history that's so prevalent through the education system and so on. We go ahead teaching those Bible stories, still disconnected from their real history, and we're realizing there's something wrong with the world. Look at the morality of this nation. Increasing abortion, pornography, racism, homosexual behavior, euthanasia. And the church is saying, wait a minute, adultery's wrong, don't you understand? And hey, you need to trust in Jesus. What are you doing out there? And hey, wait a minute, pornography is wrong. And hey, euthanasia is wrong. And you've got to stop abortion. And well, we've got to end racism. And hey, homosexual behavior is wrong. And what's the world saying? The world's saying, stop imposing your views on me, you narrow-minded, bigoted people. You see, what we're trying to do as a church is to impose a morality on a culture that has a foundation for a different morality. You know, Bruce Willis, how many of you heard of Bruce Willis? You watch those programs? Anyway, Bruce Willis was interviewed for a newspaper article, and he said this: organized religion used to hang the whole thing on one hook. If you don't do these things, if you don't act morally, you're going to burn in hell. Unfortunately, with what we know about science, anyone who thinks at all probably doesn't believe in fire and brimstone anymore, so organized religion has lost that voice to hold up their moral hand. Do you realize what he's saying? You Christians are out there saying abortion is wrong, homosexual behavior is wrong. You are imposing morality that comes from a book that we know science has proved you can't trust. Where did Cain get his wife? What about the millions of years? What about the ape men? Well, there's not enough water to cover the earth. How did Noah fit all the animals on the ark? See, you can't trust the Bible's history, and you're imposing its morality. And the church says, well, we can believe that history, that you believe, that's okay, but you've got to believe this morality. The world is more consistent than the church. See, let me give you a practical example of all of this. Let's look at geology, okay? Now, a good verse to start off talking about geology is Matthew 19, where Jesus talks about marriage. You know why that equates to geology? Because actually it deals with the authority of the word in Genesis, that's why. When Jesus was asked about divorce that concerned marriage, he said, haven't you read, by the way, there it is, the authority of the word of God. Haven't you read that history? Haven't you read he which made them at the beginning, made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall man leave his father and mother, cleave unto his wife, and they'll be one flesh? Do you know where Jesus quoted from? Genesis 1, didn't he? And Genesis 2. But I want you to think like this. He didn't just quote from Genesis. He quoted the biology in Genesis. He quoted the anthropology in Genesis. He quoted the history in Genesis. Jesus Christ said, because the history is true, the biology is true, the anthropology is true, the doctrine of marriage is true, that it's to be a man and a woman. One man for one woman for life. By the way, if the history is not true, if the biology is not true, neither is the doctrine. You know, I'd be prepared to guarantee that those churches that condone homosexual behavior or ordain homosexual pastors do not believe in the history, the biology, the anthropology in Genesis chapters 1 through 11, because as soon as you do, it's one man for one woman. When people say to me, well, why can't it be a man and a man? Because God made a man and a woman. Because the history's true. That's why. And by the way, that's true of every single biblical doctrine of theology. Do you realize there's not one doctrine of theology that directly or indirectly, ultimately, is not founded in the history in Genesis 1 to 11? Why is there sin in the world? Genesis 1 to 11. Why did Jesus die on a cross? Genesis 1 to 11. Why is he called the last Adam? Genesis 1 to 11. Why do we wear clothes? Genesis 1 to 11. Why is there death in the world? Genesis 1 to 11. Why do we need a new heavens and a new earth? Genesis 1 to 11. Why is there a 7-day week? Because God made everything in 6 million years and rested for 1 million years. Well, you get the point, don't you? No, it's because God made everything in 6 days and rested for 1. Hey friends, you think about it, the history in Genesis 1 to 11 that gives the big picture of all the basic entities of life in the universe, and the big picture in geology, biology and so on, is foundational to the whole of the rest of the Bible, to all of our Christian doctrine, to our whole Christian worldview. If you wanted to destroy the Christian structure in a nation, one of the best ways would be to destroy that history. It's happened in England, it's happening in America, and the church condones it because the church says, that's okay, we can believe the world's history, we don't need our history as long as we trust in Jesus. And we wonder why the world doesn't listen when we try to oppose abortion and homosexual behavior. You know, in Genesis chapter 1, if you take Genesis the way Jesus did as history, God told Adam and Eve to eat fruit. He told the animals in verse 30 to eat plants. We were all vegetarian to start with. Now, I know you ate something dead for breakfast, but that's okay, because the first time God said we could eat meat was Genesis 9 after the flood, where he said, just as I gave you the plants, now I give you everything. And by the way, there is the definition of a hot dog in the Bible. Incidentally, Genesis 9 makes it obvious that Genesis 1 verse 29, Adam and Eve were vegetarian. Genesis 1 verse 30 concerning the animals is written in the same way. It's so obvious that those verses mean animals originally were vegetarian. Incidentally, you believe in millions of years, there are animals in the fossil record with stomachs preserved that have bones of other animals inside them. If they existed millions of years before Adam, then the Bible's wrong. See, I believe if you take Genesis to Revelation consistently, interpreting Scripture with Scripture, death, bloodshed, disease and suffering is a consequence of sin. Death of what we call nephesh, animals, and man. See, if you believe in millions of years, and you know most of Christian leaders do, they believe in millions of years. Most of the church does. Most people say it doesn't matter in the church. But as soon as you believe in millions of years, do you realize something? Then you've got pain, death, you have killing and disease before sin. In fact, if you believe in millions of years, do you realize there was cancer before sin, and then God said it was all very good? Paleopathology, a study of ancient diseases and fossil bones. And there are people who study this. And some of these quotes show you about, for instance, this paleopathologist who diagnosed a saurian tumor, a tumor in dinosaur bones. And then they make this interesting statement. Diseases look the same through time. It makes no difference whether this is now or 100 million years ago. The same diseases we see in our world today, you see evidence of in the bones in the fossil record. If all of that existed millions of years, as a Christian, if you believe that, millions of years before Adam, and then God said after he made Adam and Eve on the 6th day of creation, everything is very good, then God said cancer is very good. If you believe in millions of years, you've got thorns. Well, thorns millions of years old, hundreds of millions of years old, 360, 408 million years old, thorns in the fossil record. The Bible says thorns came after the curse. See, if you believe in millions of years as a Christian, then you have death, suffering, struggle, extinction. You have all of this before sin. And if God said all that was very good, then the same world we see today, which has all those same things, pain, death, killing, disease, thorns, struggle, suffering, extinction, God says is very good, then God's responsible for the mess of this world. And one of the most asked questions that non-Christians ask, how can you have a God of love if there's all this death and suffering in the world? If you believe in millions of years, you don't have a logical answer. You say, get used to it. That's God's way of doing things. But if you understand the true history in the Bible, it's not God who's responsible for the mess, or the terrorism, or the evil, or the death or disease. It's us. Because you see, the real history of the Bible, we know that Adam was told, you can eat of all the trees, there's one tree you're not to eat of, because if you do, you'll surely die. And we know what happened. Adam took the fruit. And by the way, when Adam took the fruit and rebelled against God, what he was really saying, if you think about it, was, I don't believe the word of God, and I want life without God. I want to live without God. By the way, if God gave us what we wanted, we wouldn't exist. He holds everything together by the power of his word. You know what God did? He had to judge sin with death. We died physically. From dust you came, to dust you will return. I can't believe the number of theologians that try to spiritualize that. I had one say to me, well, the dust represents the ape that God breathed into to become a man. You know, God took dust, made a man. I said, well, what ape does he return to when he dies? He returns to dust. It's obviously physical death as well as being separated from God, which happened immediately that Adam rebelled. Because we're made in the image of God, of course, we're different to the animals. We have a soul that's going to live forever. God didn't make the animals as he made Adam and Eve. Let the earth bring forth the animals. Let us make man in our image. And man didn't become a living being till God breathed into him. As we look around this world, do you know what I believe is happening? We're living in a world where God has withdrawn some of that sustaining power. He's actually given us a taste of what it's like to live without God. Do you like it? No. He's given us what we wanted. We wanted life without God. Okay. Well, where's your God of love in the midst of this? Even though we told God we didn't want him, he said, but I want you. And even though you rebelled against me and you sinned in Adam, some people say, why do we get blamed for what Adam did? The Bible makes it clear. Adam was the head of the human race. We were in Adam. We have the same nature as Adam. What he did, we did. God said, I love you so much, I'm going to step into history and provide a way of salvation for you. What a God of love. That even though we said we didn't want him, he said, but I want you. You know, the Lord made garments of skin. He made clothes for Adam and Eve, which means he must have killed at least one animal. Hebrews 9 says, without the shedding of blood, there's no remission, no forgiveness. And Leviticus 17 says, the life of the creature is in the blood. Blood represents life. Right there in the garden, God killed an animal, gave up its life, and he clothed Adam and Eve. I pictured the animal as a lamb. We're not told what the animal was, but the reason I pictured it as a lamb, because here we have the gospel. Here we have the first blood sacrifice as a covering for their sin, a picture of what was to come in Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Genesis 3:15 is really the whole Bible in a nutshell. Think about it. I'll put enmity between thee and the woman, thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, thou shalt bruise his heel. There's the whole Bible in a nutshell. One verse right there in Genesis 3. And friends, I want you to think about this. If there was all this death and bloodshed and disease and suffering before Adam sinned, what does death have to do with sin? What does the shedding of blood have to do with the atonement? In fact, you imagine Adam and Eve living in the garden. Oh, this is a perfect world, Adam. Yes, it's very good, just like God said. But if underneath you already had millions of years of death, pain, struggle, disease, suffering, you just destroyed the whole basis of the message of the cross. In fact, you know what? We get it the wrong way round. You see, the garden is not on top of the bones. I'd like to say to you, the bones are actually on top of the garden because the bones, by and large, are the evidence of the global flood, the judgment of man's rebellion. And yet the world says, no, that's millions of years before man. We're saying, no, it's evidence that man has rebelled against God and God judges sin. And he provided a way of salvation through an ark. Just as he has for Noah, just as he has for us. He did for Noah, who had to go through a doorway to be saved. So do we. But Jesus Christ said, I'm the door. By me, if any man enter in, he'll be saved. See, Paul says in Romans that the whole of creation groans and travails in pain. Something wrong with today's world. You know, people try to argue against this. For instance, Hugh Ross from Reasons to Believe, a progressive creationist, talks about plants and, well, what about the suffering and death of grasses and leaves and so on? Wait a minute, you need to read the Bible. In Genesis 1, there's a nephesh, a life spirit that applies to man and animals. It doesn't apply to plants. Plants are not living like animals. Oh man, in fact, you can even see that. You know, you can put dead plants down the front of an auditorium like this, and they look really nice, but you don't tend to go shoot a cow, drag it down, just leave it right here on the front. I mean, if you're walking out there in the woods, you know, you'll sit on a dead tree, but do you ever look at a dead moose and say, wow, what a great place to sit? I mean, there's something different between animal death and human death. And then I have people say to me, oh, well, what if Adam had stood on an ant? Or what if he had fallen over and hit his head? Or what if an elephant stood on a mouse? And you know, we've got to remember we're living in a fallen world. You know, what would it be like in a world where God upholds everything by the power of his word? 100%. You know, Colossians says he upholds everything. Remember in Deuteronomy, find out about the Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years. Their clothes didn't wear out. Their feet didn't swell. You see again in Deuteronomy 29, you see that as well. Their shoes didn't wear out. In Nehemiah, their clothes didn't wear out and their feet didn't swell. Or what about the story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who went into the fire and came out without even the smell of smoke on them? See, when God preserves something 100%, nothing's going to be harmed or hurt. You know, friends, I'd like to say to you that the real battle between creation evolution, between secular worldview, Christian worldview, is really a battle about two histories of death. If you take the Bible's history as written, there was no death. Death is now an enemy, the Bible says. It's an intrusion. It's an intruder. It's an enemy. And one day it'll be thrown into the lake of fire. It's a temporary part of history because of Adam's fall. But if you believe in millions of years, death has always been here. It's a permanent part of history, and it will be in the future. You know, what you believe about this whole issue of death really also plays out in how you view things in our present world. If you look at someone who's died, for instance, I had a brother 5 years younger than me, died last year of a terrible brain disease. If you believe in millions of years, and all this suffering, death and disease and pain existed for millions of years, and you believe that that's how God made everything, as Hugh Ross believes, then I can understand why you would get angry at God if a loved one dies. God, why'd you do this? In fact, on September 11, in America, on that terrible day, people said concerning the World Trade Center, why did God do this? Why would He allow this? Well, if you look at death through the real biblical history that Adam sinned, and you understand that we're living in a fallen world, it was once perfect, there's going to be a restoration one day, then when someone dies, we should be saying, woe is me, like Paul said, who can deliver me from this bondage of death and decay? We should recognize it's our fault because we sinned in Adam. You know, when you look at the World Trade Center bombings, people would say, you know, well, why do you think that happened? You know, many Christian leaders on their websites around the world, we were shocked because many of them said, well, we don't know why this happened, we don't really have an answer, we just have to trust God, all things work together for good. Answers in Genesis said, we got an answer. We can tell you what happened. Adam sinned. See, I had people say, well, why would God let all those innocent people die? Well, really there were no innocent people in the World Trade Center, as there are none in this room. You know, when the Tower of Siloam fell on people and killed people, Jesus said, do you think they were worse sinners than others? And you know what his answer to that question was? Repent, unless you likewise perish. In other words, you know what he's saying? Yes, they died, but you're going to die. That was their time to die. You will die. It's like people said to me, I'm glad I wasn't in the World Trade Center and I would have died. And I said, well, don't worry, your turn's coming. You'll get there. That was their turn, this will be your turn. Whose fault was it that the World Trade Center was blown up? Well, it was the evil of the terrorists, the sin of the terrorists. They'll answer for their sins, but ultimately it's our fault. Why? Because we sinned in Adam. You know what shocked me? That Christians were shocked. Now, we might be shocked at the way it happened, but do you realize what happened at the World Trade Center is happening today in every nation of the world? You know what happens? Evil people do evil things and people die. It's no different. By the way, more people were killed by abortion in America on that day than were killed in the World Trade Center. It's one of the reasons I co-authored this book with Carl Whelan about death and suffering, talking about my brother Robert. He didn't even know that he had this brain disease and was very sad. It's a very down-to-earth sort of book, because we ask those questions, you know, why would a young man who loved the Lord, taught His Word, why do you think that would happen to him and so on? But you know what he told his own congregation about death? He said, do you realize that death is normal in an abnormal world? Disease is normal in an abnormal world. Even the people that Jesus healed and raised from the dead got sick and died. And he said, as a Christian, when you die, then you're totally healed. What a difference when you believe the history in Genesis. Then you've got answers for the world. You see, that how many times do we even read our Sunday school material that says to kids, oh, look how God beautifully created this little animal to rip the insides out of this one. Isn't God good? See, that's how we often do things. We're looking at things in a fallen world and saying, isn't God great? He created man-eating sharks. I've seen that sort of stuff in Christian literature. Sort of reminded me when I was at the British Museum, you know, they have all these statues they've ripped off from around the world, and I saw some people looking at a broken Greek statue, and they were saying, oh, wonderful, marvellous, inspiring, beautiful. And so, you know, a little boy nearby looked at it and said, what are you talking about? It all looks broken to me. But you see, we can see the remnant of beauty, can't we? Hey, you know something? A lot of Christians look at this world and they take their non-Christian friends out and say, can't you see it's a beautiful world? Look how God made the world. We often do that with non-Christians. You know what we got to recognize? Wait a minute, it's all broken. Because they look at the world and say, but look at all the death and suffering, look at all the disease, look what's happened to all these children. Wait a minute, what do you mean? What do you mean? I don't see a God of love, I see people dying, I see children starving. Is that your God? See, God didn't make this world. He made the original world that was perfect, but we messed it up. It is now a fallen world. If you believe in millions of years, you do not understand the fall. You have no concept of a fallen world. That's why I believe so many young people in our churches have no concept of sin, no concept of the holiness of God, no concept of what our sin has done, because we let them believe the millions of years as taught through the education system, and this is the way it's always been. They have no concept of our rebellion against God and our need of a Saviour. You know, there are people like Hugh Ross who say, you people who go out there teaching the earth is only young and so on, you're putting a stumbling block in people's way. If we only taught them that the world's billions of years old because we know that's true, that'll help lead them to God. You know, the opposite is true. I have many, many quotes. I only have time for a couple, but I have many. The late Dr. Carl Sagan said this: if God is omnipotent and omniscient, why didn't he start the universe out in the first place? It would come out the way that he wants. Why is he constantly repairing and complaining? Knows one thing the Bible makes clear: the biblical God is a sloppy manufacturer. He's not good at design. He's not good at execution. He'd be out of business if there was any competition. In other words, Carl Sagan looked at this world and said, where's your all-powerful, all-knowing God? Look at all the death, look at all the suffering, look at the mutations, look at all the mistakes out there. I don't see an all-powerful God. He was looking at a fallen world. And sadly, people like Hugh Ross and others would be saying to him, no, you're looking at the world God made. And I'm saying, no, you're not. You're looking at the world God made, and we messed up. It's a fallen world because of sin. You know, Charles Darwin had that problem. When his daughter Annie died, in his biography, Annie's cruel death destroyed Charles' tatters of beliefs in a moral, just universe. Later he would say that this period claimed the final death knell for his Christianity, and Charles took his stand as an unbeliever. How can there be a God of love? Look at all this death and suffering in the world. You know, it was interesting to watch on the PBS television series about evolution, where they actually were portraying what happened to Charles Darwin here, and sort of based on a fact of history, but then they embellished it somewhat. Darwin and his family go to church after Annie dies. Darwin doesn't go into the church. His family do. And Darwin stands outside. That's basically sort of what happened. But then PBS did something. Charles Darwin heard a hymn being sung from inside the church. And guess what hymn they played on PBS television? All things bright and beautiful, the Lord God made them all. In other words, they were saying, see how contradictory it is for Christians to believe in a God of love when poor old Charles' daughter died. By the way, I think we need a second verse for that hymn. All things marred, mutated, the Lord God cursed them all. So maybe we'll understand what really happened out there. Hey, by the way, think of Ted Turner. Ted Turner's leaving a horrible legacy in atheistic media around the world. When interviewed for the New York Times, Turner is a strident non-believer, having lost his faith after his sister Mary Jane died of a painful disease. I was taught that God was love and God was powerful. I couldn't understand how someone so innocent should be made or allowed to suffer so. You know what we found in America? Many of the leading humanists in this country of America, many of the leading humanists that fight Christianity and oppose the Christian worldview, many of them claim they were brought up in what they call Bible fundamentalist homes. Well, what happened? Do you know what I believe happened? They went to Sunday school and were taught Bible stories. And the church, by and large, didn't answer the questions of the world. And we handed them over to the world and said, you can believe the history of the world, just believe the spiritual and moral things. And they became consistent and realized if the Bible's history is not true, neither is the rest. And now they're out there opposing Christianity. Here's another sad example of what can happen when you believe in them millions of years. Charles Templeton was said to be the great evangelist of the 1950s, even bigger than Billy Graham back then. And you know, I preached in a church in Edinburgh, stood in the very pulpit that Charles Templeton preached in the 50s. And Charles Templeton, written up in newspapers across America, around the world, you know, big crusades like the Billy Graham crusades, thousands of people coming forward and so on. He was the evangelist of the 1950s. Charles Templeton died a couple of years ago, but he died an unbeliever. Charles Templeton, in 1994, wrote a book that atheist groups around the world sell and promote with great fervour. There's a book called Farewell to God. He said, I believe there is no supreme being with human attributes, no God in the biblical sense. Life is a result of timeless evolutionary forces having reached this present transient state over millions of years. And all through his book, what you find is this emphasis on how can there be a God of love with all this death and disease? How can there be a God of love? Look at the mess of the world. How can there be a God of love? You know what happened? He went to Princeton Seminary. At Princeton Seminary, the theologians taught him to believe in millions of years. he became consistent and realized if millions of years is true, there can't be a God of love. And right through the book, you see the emphasis. Why does God's grand design require a creature with teeth designed to crush spines, rend flesh, claws fashioned to seize, tear, venom to paralyze, and so on? The grim and inescapable reality is all life is predicated on death. Every carnivorous creature must kill and devour another creature. It has no option. Nature is, in Tennyson's vivid phrase, red in tooth and claw, and life is a carnival of blood. I believe that in common with all living creatures, we die and cease to exist as an entity. So he died, but he didn't cease to exist as an entity. He has to answer to the God of creation. I believe generations of kids are being led astray, generations of adults in our churches, just like Templeton. Those who teach millions of years are helping to destroy the foundation of the Christian worldview. They're helping to destroy the foundation of the authority of the Word of God in people's minds, the foundation of the church in people's minds. Do you see, when it comes to the Grand Canyon then, what we need to be thinking about is the flood of Noah's day. You see, when you look at all those layers of the Grand Canyon, billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. What a difference when you put on those biblical glasses and you look at the Grand Canyon and you say, full of dead things, death came after sin. If the Bible's history is true, that could not have been formed over millions of years. It's one of the reasons why there are scientists, creation scientists, as you heard last night, as you'll hear the rest of the week in this conference. He'll give you all sorts of interesting information from the present world to show, hey, what we see fits with what the Bible says. Millions of years doesn't work. And you know, a lot of things that we were indoctrinated in is taking millions of years. We point out to people, hey, the more we do research, real science, the more we find that's not true, like stalactites and stalagmites, or stalactites and stalagmites. Did you know that there are scientists, like here's someone from the Forest Service who's watched stalactite grow several inches in a matter of days? So I was interested to see this quote in a secular magazine about Carlsbad Caverns. From 1924 to 1988, there was a visitor sign above the entrance to Carlsbad Caverns that said Carlsbad was at least 260 million years old. In 1988, the sign was changed to read 7 to 10 million years old. For a little while, the sign read it was 2 million years old. Now the sign is gone. One of the things you'll find in many of the books we have, and the Creation magazine, and the TJ, and the other lectures that we have in this series, you'll hear scientists talking from biology, geology, astronomy, anthropology, physics, chemistry, saying, hey, when you do real science, there's nothing that contradicts the Bible's history, and there's an awful lot that we can show you confirms the Bible's history. The Bible is true. Can't ultimately prove it, that's true. We're not out to do that. We're out to say, if it is what it claims to be, it will not only make sense of the world, but real science should confirm that, and we should be able to logically defend our faith, as it says in 1 Peter 3:15, to give answers for what we believe. Wow, imagine if Christians were trained like that. Now, I want to finish this to sum it all up for you in a particular way, to deal with, again, the foundational consequences of what's been happening. You see, what you believe about your history determines your morality and your salvation. If you believe the Bible's history, we're all descendants of one man, Adam, the Bible's true, God sets the rules, God owns us. God determines right and wrong. It's like the time a boy came to me and said, sir, I think everyone has a right to their own opinions. I said, well, son, do I have a right to all my opinions? Yes, everyone has a right to their own opinions. Well, my opinion is types like you are dangerous and I think we should shoot you. You can't do that. Why not? It's not right. Why isn't it right? It's wrong. Why is it wrong? It's not right. So wait a minute, son. You said you have a right to your opinions? Yes. I have a right to my opinions? Yes. Well, my opinion is types like you are dangerous. If I get enough to agree with me in our culture, we'll eliminate you. You can't do that. Why not? It's not right. It's wrong. And you realize something? If all is relative, there are no absolutes. Of course, I had people say to me, there are no absolutes. That is, they want absolute. You realize that? Imagine what would happen in a culture where we took whole generations through an education system and said, there's no basis for right and wrong. You're just an animal anyway. There's no God. Everything is explained without God. When they had no king to tell them what to do, they all did what was right in their own eyes. And we wonder why we've got increasing school violence and all those sorts of problems. You know, it's so sad when I was over in the British Museum of Natural History, read the sign, we belong to the ape family, and all these kids going past, we're just an ape. And then they read this sign in the science centre next door. How special are human genes? Well, some of us think that we humans have a special place in the animal kingdom However, in other words, but, it's not true. The human genome is similar to a chimpanzee's and has a lot in common with the genome of a fruit fly. There was an article just recently where some scientists were proposing that we should bring apes basically into the same classification as man, because we're so closely related. I mean, it's obvious. You go to any zoo, you can have a great conversation with an ape. Do you realize what whole generations of kids are being told? What do you do with fruit flies? You just squash them, get rid of them. What do you do with spare cats? Get rid of them. What do you do with spare babies? You get rid of them. You're just an animal. Friends, I want to go further than that. If you believe the 6 days of creation, you're really saying the Bible's true because it teaches God created in 6 days. We're going to talk about that in detail in another session. See, if you believe in millions of years, you didn't get that from the Bible. You can't show me millions of years in the Bible. It's not there. You got that from outside the Bible, from man's fallible dating methods, and others will deal with that in detail about the fact that all dating methods are fallible. Because they're based on things in the past when you weren't there to see them, initial conditions, rates of change, and so on. What you're really saying as a Christian, if you believe in millions of years, you're really saying man determines truth and we can use what man says to reinterpret the Bible, then God is not the ultimate authority, man is. And if you can reinterpret the Bible's geology on the basis of man's ideas, and you can reinterpret the Bible's biology and astronomy and anthropology on the basis of man's ideas, which much of the church has done, well, let's become consistent. Let's reinterpret the Bible's morality as well. And that's what happens. Because you see, it's more than just an issue of the age of the earth. It's this philosophy that man by himself determines truth. And if you teach people that and they have this philosophical, attitudinal change to Scripture, that it's not the absolute authority, that man can determine truth by himself, and the Bible's somewhere over here, then if you reinterpret all these parts of the Bible back there in Genesis, why not reinterpret the rest? And that's increasingly what's happened. You see, if the Bible's history is true, we have a basis. A basis for right and wrong, a basis for marriage, one man for one woman, rightful place for sex within marriage, one man for one woman, why we wear clothes, what life is all about. Because as the German philosopher Nietzsche said back in the 1800s, morality is not yet a problem, but it would become a problem, he predicted, when people discovered that without religion there is no morality. The English flatheads thought it possible to get rid of the Christian God while retaining Christian morality. They did not realize that when one gives up the Christian faith, one pulls the right to Christian morality out from under one's feet. I saw an article on television a year or so ago about some schools in California where they were worried about the fact that kids didn't seem to have what they call morality anymore, or ethics, and they said, we need to get back to teaching morality in our schools. What they were really saying was, we want to teach Christian morality. They didn't want to say that, or admit that. But I got news for them. You can't have Christian morality without Christianity. You can't have Christianity without the Bible. And you can't have the Bible without Genesis 1 to 11. You see, if you believe that man determines truth, if he determines truth in geology, biology, astronomy, anthropology, and you can reinterpret the Bible, if you're a Christian, believe in millions of years, why not reinterpret the morality? And oh, by the way, that is happening in the church. There are churches that condone homosexual behavior. There are churches that condone abortion. You ask many young people today what they believe about this. In fact, George Barna found out, do you know the percentage of teenagers that call themselves born-again Christians, the percentage that now say they do believe in absolute truth? It's down to 9%. What's happened? This philosophy that man determines truth has pervaded the culture. And so what we see in our culture is the collapse of Christian morality, and we see an increase in secular humanism. We see a change in worldviews. Why? Because there's been a change foundationally from believing in the absolute authority of the Word of God to man determines truth. That's what the creation evolution issue is all about. That's what the age of the earth issue is all about. That's what the argument over the 6 days is about. And many of you have seen the two classic castle diagrams that we have in Answers in Genesis, but I want to explain these in a different way this morning to leave you with this message. My heart has been, as I travel across America, England, Australia, New Zealand, around the world, I get such a burden because I find that most pastors, even conservative pastors, still don't understand this issue. And I find that so many in the church, so many Christian leaders, there are people that say, oh, we want Answers in Genesis in, and we want you to knock this evolution stuff. And we say, don't you understand, there's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. I want you to understand the real nature of what's going on here. I see conservative churches that we've got to follow other churches that are making the church look much more like the world so we can attract the world. Don't you understand? That's not the problem. You're putting a Band-Aid on a broken arm. No, don't you understand that there's a bigger problem here? You've got to see what the bigger problem is. Let me explain it to you. So on the left we have the castle of humanism, that foundation of evolution, millions of years, man determines truth. And we have that castle of humanism that comes out of that. By that I mean, everyone does what is right in his own eyes. All morality is relative if there's no absolute authority. So you can justify anything if you want to. Doesn't mean you will, but you can, logically. On the other side we have the foundation of creation. God's word is truth. And the castle of Christianity. See, the humanists are very clever. How do you destroy the Christian structure? Well, you don't aim for the resurrection of the virgin birth. You see, that's so obvious. No, you've got to aim for the foundation. Once you get rid of the history, once you get rid of the earthly things, once you can show people the Bible's history is not true, eventually the spiritual and moral things will go anyway. And you know what much of the church has done? Oh yeah, we can destroy our own earthly things. That's okay. We don't need that history. As long as we cling to the spiritual and moral things. That's why you find today in the church, most of what you hear preached, spiritual things, moral things, relationships, things about worship and so on, you know what we're not dealing with? The real foundational issue as to what happened in the culture. Let me explain that castle to you in a different way. I really want us to understand, if you can take this message back to your church leaders, see if you can understand what's happened here from a big picture perspective, okay? The church is out there preaching the gospel. Come to Jesus. Come to the cross. Be saved. But you see, what happened? Back in the 1700s, 1800s, there's a particular attack on the authority of the Word of God. Here's this missile of millions of years coming in. And the missile hits. As far as the church is concerned, but that didn't hit the cross. That's got nothing to do with the cross. But what they didn't understand was it was hitting at the foundation. But you see, much of the church doesn't understand that, and they're looking at the cross and they're saying, but, it didn't hit the cross. That wasn't an attack on Christianity. You see, if the world aims its sights right at the cross, the church would say, alarm bells, something's wrong, got to do something here. But Satan is very clever. No, he's aimed the missiles somewhere that the church doesn't really understand. See, Genesis, that's a side issue. See, that didn't hit the message of the cross. What are you talking about? So the world continues the attack. Millions of years, ape men, age dating methods, no global flood. And the missiles hit. But it didn't hit the cross. But what do you notice? The cross is starting to tilt. And you see that black smoke there that represents unbelief is starting to encompass the culture. Because generations have been told, but the Bible's history is not true. The Bible's history is not true. But the church is saying, but it didn't hit the cross. And then we see things start to happen in the culture. Hey, prayer is outlawed in schools. That unbelief is taking over. What does the church do? Well, you've got to trust in Jesus anyway. Another news flash. Well, creation's been outlawed in schools. And the unbelief keeps growing. What does the church do? Well, Jesus is going to return. You know what's interesting to me? I'm not going to get into eschatology. But let me say this. I find so much of the church today is more interested in eschatology than they are in, if you like, genealogy. They are more interested in, we've got to make sure we have a pastor that believes this view of eschatology, but I don't see them out there saying, we've got to make sure we have a pastor that believes the right thing about Genesis. They think eschatology is more important than Genesis. I've got news for you. Genesis is foundational to every single doctrine. Eschatology is not. You see, they've missed the point. Again, the earthly things, they don't understand. And so what I find is there's much more of an interest in the church. We'll spend millions of dollars buying books on eschatology, even fictional books. And we won't spend a dime on Genesis. Why? Well, we've got to look ahead, not behind. Wait a minute, don't you understand where the attack occurred? Newsflash, the Bible's been outlawed in schools. Well, we need to get the Bible back into schools somehow. Don't you realize why the Bible's been outlawed in schools by and large? Don't you realize the foundation? Look at the unbelief growing. Look at what's happened to the cross. Newsflash, commandments outlawed in schools, 10 commandments outlawed in schools. What's the worst shame? We've got to concentrate on our worship programs. We we've got to really appeal to people's emotions and get them into church somehow, and we've got to change all our music and everything else, and don't you understand what's happening? Then my second castle diagram is this one. You see, what is Answers in Genesis really all about? Restoring the foundation of the authority of the Word of God, opposing the wrong history that's taken over the culture, opposing the wrong philosophical foundations of the culture, so that we can fight those weapons and issues all at the same time. In other words, picture it like this. Along comes Answers in Genesis. We stand there in front of the church with our little radar. We're saying, number one, we're going to restore that foundation. See the little men down there? We're restoring the foundation. God's word's true from the beginning. Let's get back to the authority of the Word of God. Warning, warning. There's an attack coming on the foundation. We're going to provide you with the Patriot missiles to destroy them. And we're teaching then the church, and we're saying, now we want to equip you in the church so that you have the same radar and you have the same missiles to counteract these attack missiles, so that you will recognize the attack. So that as you preach the gospel of Jesus Christ now, we'll stand there as a specialist organization to help you, to equip you, to help you answer the questions. But now you notice the church is standing on the Genesis down the bottom, the Genesis foundation, because it's understood we've got to get back to the authority of the Word of God beginning right back there. Friends, do you see what's happened? Do you see the solution? And I don't want you to misunderstand me. I am not in any way saying we shouldn't have worship in churches or go out there and tell people to trust in Jesus. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is, it's the picture I see in the church. And that is, we see, by and large in the church, that they think the answer to the problem is worship, or the answer is the music, or the answer are these mega churches to bridge the gap between the church and the world. But if you stand back and look at the big picture, what is happening to America happened to England. And if the church does not start to recognize the real foundational nature of the attack, you see, it's to do with the whole way of thinking that changed. Wow. If we could only go out there and even help the conservative churches understand this. Because I find the majority have very little clue in regard to this. And I look on the ministry of Answers in Genesis today, and I don't want to sound arrogant in saying this. Whether it's Answers in Genesis or ICR or other creation ministries, I believe that the Lord has raised up creation ministries today to begin a new reformation in the church. And I view the creation ministries worldwide as a new reformation ministry that I believe, if this world goes on for generations to come, people will look back, and as we look on Martin Luther and the Reformation, I believe we'll look on the creation movement in the same way. Because I see it as that vehicle that God has raised up to call the church back to the authority of the Word of God.
Highly recommend you know that chapel is
Before we have any comments or discussion, I'd like to give you three things about that. One is his basic push, or his basic focus to this, which is a large part of what Terry tries to push all the time, is that our churches are failing because we forget Genesis.
Amen.
Because we don't believe in it. In the last chapter of my book, the focus of what I say is, if somebody came and told me this book is not right on history, not right on science, not right on geology, not right on astrophysics, not right on anything for the first 11 chapters of Genesis, but you must believe in Jesus Christ to save your life, I would say that's junk. What I do is lay out that ours is not an irrational faith, it is not a blind faith. Amen. It is a completely rational faith. In fact, it's the only rational faith.
Amen. That's true.
What too often happens in churches, and I've told this story and half of you've heard it, is what happened to Dan Brown. Dan Brown wrote what? The Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code. In the 8th grade, he was hearing all this stuff in science class about millions of years and no worldwide flood and all that kind of stuff. And he came to his Lutheran pastor and he said, you know, make some sense out of this for me. How can there be millions of years and there was only 6 days of creation and all this kind of stuff? And his Lutheran pastor's answer was, good boys don't ask such questions. Now, the problem, and we can beat up that pastor all we want, the problem was his major, and that's not just Lutherans, that's Baptists, Catholics, and all of them, their major was in theology. Their major was in seminary. Their major was not in astrophysics, biology, and geology, and he didn't feel equipped to handle that, and most of our pastors don't. And so they fall back on just Jesus. The problem is they're being attacked from underneath by our society, by our education system, by what they see on television, and what they hear in science classes on Nova. I was a science teacher. I was a mathematics teacher. I know exactly what's going on. And then there's the role of what happens in Sunday school in the church outside of the pastor. Let me tell you a little story. Mom and Dad were coming home and they had their kid, about 12, 13 years old. They asked him, hey, what'd you learn in Sunday school today? You know, most of them say, we learned about Jesus. That's the only answer you get. But he told them a story. He said, well, we learned about the Hebrews crossing the Red Sea. He said, oh, well, tell me what they told you. Well, the Israelis, the Hebrews, they got themselves up against the Red Sea and the Egyptian army was following them. And they were trapped against the Red Sea. So Moses directed the Israeli army to go out and mine the pass going into the area. And that kept the Egyptians out for a day and a half, or a night and a day. And during that time, he called out the Israeli Corps of Engineers, which built a pontoon bridge across the Red Sea. And once the pontoon bridge was constructed, they took all of their buses and trucks and moved all the way across the Red Sea. But by that time, the Egyptians had cleared the minefield in the pass. And they came after them with all their tanks, artillery, and everything, all their people across the pontoon bridge. Fortunately, the Israelis had cleared the pontoon bridge. On his walkie-talkie, Moses called in the Israeli Air Force that bombed the pontoon bridge, sinking all the Egyptians into the Red Sea. And his mother looked at him aghast and said, they did not teach you that. He said, no, but if I told it the way they told it, you'd never believe it. This is what we're doing in Sunday school and churches. We are teaching Bible stories and not Bible truths. I have this fight with my own wife. She is in love with Kitty Arks. She loves Kitty Arks, and she's our Sunday school director. So in all children's classes, she wants to have kangaroos and elephants and everything else hanging out the side. Giraffes, the size of the ark. The problem is, that looks like a story, a fairy tale, because it is. And when they get old enough to understand that it is, they now believe the whole story is just a story. We don't, as a group, treat this as real history, as real science. And that is the undermining thing that has killed our ability to move the gospel forward. And that's what he was transmitting. Your thoughts? Yes, sir.
I'm glad you use that analogy of story versus account. It's an account of history, it's not a story. When we talk about stories, we've talked about Aesop's fables and all kinds of Jack and the Beanstalk, and those are stories that are about the same as the ark. And so when it comes down to the brass tacks about is it truthful or not, They got no way around it. I use this analogy when I taught a five. If the first 5 words aren't true, in the beginning God created. If the first 5 verses aren't true, if the first 5 chapters aren't true, if the first 5 books aren't true, why in the world would any of the rest of it be true? How can you believe in something after those are not true? So he did a good job of setting the stage for it. It's impossible to just believe in Jesus with all the rest of the stuff not being true.
What is our motto that we stole from Answers in Genesis?
Read the Bible.
Read the Bible from the very first verse.
Yeah.
And we can support that. We have been very gifted with this group to have such a great an astronomer, an astrophysicist, a medical doctor. We've got 4 types of engineers on this board. We've got a guy with computer background. We've got a guy with both biology and optometry background. And a dumb educator right here. We got people that can support what's in there. And we have a rational faith. Anything else before we close for you? Yes, sir.
I remember back in the late 70s in San Diego that my wife and I were looking for a church to attend. I think it was a Baptist church. And we sat in a Bible study led by the pastor. And they were talking about Genesis, Adam and Eve. And I remember one college-age student said to the teacher, the pastor, "You don't really believe there was an Adam and Eve, do you?" And he said, "No, not really, just a little illustration." And I thought to myself, this is not the kind of church I was looking for.
Amen.
And I'm a Baptist, I'm sorry you had that experience.
Yeah.
But you made a great point. It's not a disease that's just within the Baptist church or the Lutheran church or the Methodist, although the Methodists got a lot of it,
Yeah.
or the Pentecostals or anyone else. It is our compromising Scripture with the world.
That's right.
We had the wrong concept. It started 150 years ago when we got scared of Darwin's book. And we got scared that they had answers that we didn't, and we thought we had to compromise. We didn't. But we've spent actually from 1656, we're now going almost 165 years. We've spent 165 years compromising our theology, and we don't need to. Yes, sir.
So another point is, there's a term that I picked up, I think, in the early 80s called double revelation theory. Double revelation theory is, here's the Bible's position, here's science position. When they don't agree, we're going to keep both of them and try and make sense of it. It doesn't. They conflict with one. One is true, one is not. And that's where the problem is.
It's only a problem when you don't accept Genesis as real history, as real science, as a real world view. When you start declaring that this other, which is science fiction, worldview,
Yes.
there are only about 50 evidences that this solar system is less than 10,000 years old. But those are all to be thrown out because it doesn't agree with the secular worldview.
Double revelation theory.
Again, you only have problems when you just throw out the Bible ad hominem. That pastor, sadly, because we've had this fight within the Southern Baptist Convention, came from a seminary where he was taught that. Where he was taught, this is not coming from individual pastors. This is coming from our theologians that are in the seminaries.
Yeah.
Now, there are some seminaries that are holding the line. There are some professors that are holding the line. But they're becoming fewer.
Yeah.
They're becoming fewer. Yes, sir.
Would you help me? Let me see if I want to present a thought here. It is essential to believe the Bible from beginning to end. Let me restate that. It is essential to have faith in the Bible from beginning to end. And we can answer math and science and physics questions in those terms, but ultimately it is faith that is the basis of our...
That's a true statement.
Absolutely.
That's a true statement. How was Abraham saved? This is told both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament.
By faith.
By faith. It doesn't change in the New Testament. How are you saved? By faith in Jesus Christ. The whole book hangs together. I spent a whole chapter on that, how it's one mind writing. That all 66 books have an introductory book, Genesis, a concluding book, Revelation, and carry one theme throughout. Incidentally, what is that one theme throughout the Bible?
Right.
Jesus Christ. He has talked about what he will be for the 39 books of the Old Testament, and then it is testified about what he was, which fulfilled all of those 366 prophecies in the 27 books of the New Testament.
66 books.
66 total. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, the one thing that I can't get my head around, doesn't make sense to me, is Ken Ham said it himself, that back when he was young, they had hardly any materials at all. And now he just had tables of materials. And
Right. We got tables right there. I got half the stuff he tried to advertise right over there.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have not only answers in Genesis, they've got Creation Ministries International and the Creation Research Institute and all kinds of other organizations like Alpha Omega, like us. So why is now the time that pastors and churches are retreating and compromising the Bible? It's like now's the time to...
The whole talk. Because we're not walking on stable ground. We're walking on the rubble of accepting that the Genesis is not true. And once you accept that Genesis was not true, you got nothing to stand on.
It seems like it's self-perpetuating. It's been taught in seminaries, and so that's what the pastors...
Again, I don't want to beat people up, because the seminaries knew that science wasn't their thing. The pastors knew that science wasn't their thing. And so what did they focus on?
Geology.
Just preach Jesus. Just preach Jesus. But again, when you have people who are Satan and the evolutionists were not stupid.
That's right.
How do you defeat Christianity? You don't talk about abortion and all this other kind of stuff. You shoot at the foundation.
Undermine it.
Undermine it, and the whole thing will crumble. Yes, sir. Thought you had something.
I was going to ask or mention the fact that higher criticism in the middle of the 1800s, when we attack the authority of God's Word, man determines what God said as opposed to God saying what he said. And so we don't have an authoritative, it doesn't matter what seminary, I'm sorry, but they put their pants on one leg at a time too, so they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
The best of the
They're human.
seminaries, the best of the seminaries are still vulnerable. So unless we are going to grab onto God's Word as authoritative from the very first word to the very last word, we're a mess. And so science is never going to disprove God's Word because it's true. You don't have to worry about it and rub our hands together and go, oh, I hope you don't find that out. Come on.
And we are in the last days of the last days, guys. I'm just telling you. Everybody think that the rapture is going to take place when there's a time of nothing but goodness. This is the time that we see right now. It's exactly as God said it was going to be. The world is upside down. What's right is wrong, what's left is right, what's up is down. The world is in a terrible state. And the only thing that's going to correct it again is Jesus Christ coming back to take his church out of the world.
We have to have the faith to believe in him.
He's coming again, guys. This is the thing. And the falling away has occurred.
Is occurring.
The falling away started with the 1780s when people said, oh, let's construct a history that doesn't require us to
Be free of Moses, which was the goal. To free ourselves from Moses, to free ourselves from history. It was an attack on the foundation.
And that was the beginning.
I feel for Ken Ham today. Incidentally, if you do see Ken, he was making jokes about what? That he looked like what? Abraham Lincoln. He looks like Moses in the movie.
Yeah.
The last time I saw him about 2 years ago, he looked like he could have been in the movie as Moses.
Right.
He's so white.
Brilliant, that's for sure.
Yeah, he is. A couple of things, Dan. And I'll get you. I did feel for Ken while he was talking about his homeland of Australia, which he left because it became secularized before we did.
Yeah.
But you know what's going on in Australia right now?
Revival.
They have so given themselves into science outside of the Bible or common sense that they are on tyranny lockdown.
Yeah,
Thou shalt not leave your home. Forget going to church, or you'll be arrested.
It's 5 miles, isn't it?
Yep. The Jews could go, what was it, a quarter or a half mile before they lay down a cloak, and that was their new home. Yeah, no, they're right there. Yes, sir.
I'm just going to pick up on what Clarence said. Everything is backwards today. And Isaiah said it quite well in Isaiah 5. Preceding, but starting with verses 20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Who put darkness for light and light for darkness. Who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine, valiant men at mixing strong drink, who acquit the guilty for a bribe and deprive the innocent of his right.
Is that not the world today?
It's been like that since Isaiah wrote it, but it's magnified today. At least those of us who watch this country on a precipice and sliding downhill so fast that I refer to this nearly every day, wondering what is holding him back from judging this country. Because we've told him that
only a remnant.
He has judged this country. That's why we got Joe Biden for president. I'm serious. This is what we deserve.
You can get into that. Yes, ma'am.
There's a book that I read many, many years ago. It's one of my favorite books called The Flood by Ray Winkle. And in it, there's a finding that's pretty interesting. When they excavated the area that was and some of that area where they kind of think that maybe Noah was from, or the area that was civilized there before, the people had no idols, and the claim was made that they don't know for sure, but they think they were idols to themselves. And it's kind of, when you see history of man, you know how God talks about in the end it'll be like the days of Noah, right? So you see that kind of coming back, and we are idols to ourselves. The science makes us feel like gods, and so we don't fear the elements anymore except once in a while, right? And so I think that's pretty interesting, that finding.
Now that's the goal of humanism.
Yes, sir.
Is to replace God with ourselves. That we decide what's right and wrong. We decide what's true history, true science, whatever, that we become God. And you always get in trouble when you place yourself in that kind of position.
Well, we can think whatever we want about ourselves, but guess what? We're still all going to
Yes.
die.
Yes. The current thinking is there are 101 flavors of genders. Well, let you in on a little secret. There are 2. And I have firm, not only biblical, but genetic evidence of that. If you're a male, whether you want to believe it or not, you got 60,000 trillion cells in your body that all have a Y chromosome. If you're a female, you ain't got that. You got 2 X chromosomes. And there aren't 101 variations in between. There are some weird exceptions out there of XXX, XY, X, and others, but they are extremely, extremely rare. And they are part of problems, of deformities, and incidentally, all of those are, what's the word when you don't produce babies?
Oh, sterile. Sterile. Yeah.
Sterile. They're all sterile. Yes, sir.
A thing I noticed was that the Scopes trial was in 1925. in the middle of the year, in the heat of the summer. At the beginning of the year, Calvin Coolidge said, "The business of America is business." And that was a curse upon America, because it said our business is no longer evangelism, our business is no longer faith in Christ, our business is making money. And that curse was manifested that year when the man who ran for president 3 times could not answer the simplest questions regarding the faith of Christ.
Regarding faith. And again, we didn't believe it from the first verse. We weren't into it. We weren't in depth. We weren't reading it. We weren't versed in it. Something to close with, because we need to get out of here. When we do get through, we have paid materials on the left side, free materials on the right. Please do sign up if you want to get the newsletter sent to you by email each month. Our friends at the Institute for Creation Research, their new head, Randy Galuzza, who used to be with us, is searching for ways to free up their people to do more research. One of the ideas, they haven't decided on this, but one of their ideas is, well, maybe, because it takes them 3 weeks out of every month to prepare and put together, this is 80% of their entire staff, to put together the beautiful Acts and Facts magazine that we see each month. To try and free up some time, they are considering, well, maybe during slow months like the middle of summer or the start of the year, maybe we need to cut back to 10, 9, or 8 magazines that we send out so that we free up time for more research for our people. They are looking for ideas. If you really value that magazine, if you get the Acts and Facts, which I would recommend, it's free. It's a beautiful magazine, but it's free. Then I would recommend to you that if you have an idea for how they can free up staff, that you send it to them and you express yourself on how many issues you want them to be doing each year. I do have one example of that periodical back. Let's close in prayer. Lord God, thank you for this time together. Thank you for the message that we can rely upon your word from the very first verse, and that it is crucial that we do so that we can spread the gospel. No one was ever saved by believing that a day was a day. But sadly, a lot of people have lost their faith because they didn't believe a day was a day. We thank you, Lord, for what you've given us, for the great creation, for the breaths that you give us. Protect these people as they go home. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.